What I'd like to do right now is we're going to be joined by Dave Meltzer here at the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. And Dave, of course, has been covering all the situations that have been developing over the last week. And it's been quite a hectic week for anybody trying to cover this trial. And let's bring on Dave right now if we can. Dave, are you with us?
Yeah, how you doing, John?
We're doing okay here in New York, getting ready to travel to Pennsylvania for this thing. And a lot of developments have taken place this past week. Perhaps the biggest is the Hulk Hogan situation, the on-again, off-again appearance of Hogan at this trial coming up this week. And I believe the judge made the ruling this past Friday that Hogan did not have to come.
Yeah, apparently that, as it all has come out now, one of the charges against Dr. Zahorian was selling steroids to Hulk Hogan. And on Friday, the charge was dropped, and there was really the reasons were sealed, and so I really don't know. And it's really, you really can't comment on something that you really know nothing about, other than there was an indictment, that was given, and apparently on the charge of selling steroids to 5 different wrestlers, one of whom was Hogan, and obviously for the World Wrestling Federation, and it isn't just the World Wrestling Federation in this case, because there are so many people, and someone who was very close to the situation was talking to me last night and pointing this out to me, that there are so many people between New Line Cinema and vitamin companies and all this who have so much of an interest in Hulk Hogan that if Hogan's name were to be tarnished in this thing, it would not just mean, I think me and you would look at it in a way where, what's the effect going to be on wrestling? But there's, between movies and merchandising and all this, there's many people's jobs that depend on, licensing of the name of Hulk Hogan. It's a multi-million dollars, deriving from that, and not just wrestling revenue. And I'm not sure exactly how that all ties in, but I'm sure it does in some way.
Of course, there is a lot of livelihoods being dependent upon Hulk Hogan and his image and his success in the business as far as being a role model for children, etc.
Exactly.
And we can understand partially what took place this past week. But I
certainly can understand the WWF and companies that have things to do with Hulk Hogan trying to work feverishly to keep his name from being involved in this case, because being involved in the case would do nothing to benefit Hulk Hogan. That's for sure.
Yeah.
The one thing, though, is that whether Hulk Hogan is involved or not will probably make a difference in one way as far as media coverage, but the case and the situation is the same whether Hulk Hogan's name is involved or not, because 3 weeks ago we didn't expect Hulk Hogan to be involved in this, and it's still a big story.
Yeah, it was, but just past week when the volcano exploded, especially when Hogan's name was being mentioned about possibly being called to testify, then you saw the mainstream media came out in a vengeance from Entertainment Tonight to the New York Times, all the wire services. I believe there's articles in virtually every newspaper in the country regarding this. And with Hogan's name now being withdrawn, I feel that it's still going to be a big story, but it won't be as big to mainstream media.
You're absolutely right. It took the story, without a doubt, it took the story down about 3 notches because of Hogan's name not being involved. But that's just definitely true.
No, you certainly had Peter Jennings on ABC News, World News Tonight, do a piece on it as well, and it got a lot of coverage. And we are, I'm excited about covering the trial going down to Pennsylvania, but then again, I'm still sad in a way because it does hurt the business. And then on the other side of the coin, I'm hoping that it will help the business long term by making the promoters realize that maybe now's the time to finally try to abolish steroids from the business, or at least try to get rid of it a little bit at a time and phase it out. I'm certainly hoping that the promoters of this country take notice of what happens this week and try to change their policies a little bit.
Well, see, now that's the one thing, of course, we both agree, and we're both wrestling fans, and we want to see wrestling flourish, and we want to see the guys, and you know, a lot of the guys want to take steroids because they're just looking for the day. But the fact is that, you know, when Billy Graham was 30 years old and when Billy Graham was 35 years old, he wanted to take steroids and he wanted to be the biggest guy there was and the most muscular guy there was. And if you ask him today, which I did the other day, I mean, if he could do it all again now, he's 48 years old, he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't have touched the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you know, I think a lot of these guys, when they get to be 45, 48, 50, the whole way you look at these things is different. You know, and it's not just with steroids. I mean, I remember at the Cauliflower Alley banquet, I was talking to Luthez, who never took a steroid, and we were just talking about weight training. And then we were with a guy, I think his name was Seymour Koenig, who was you know, one of the big competitive weightlifters, you know, back about 30, 40 years. And we were both talking about, you know, lifting weights. And, you know, he was saying that, you know, he would have, if he had known, you know, what was going, you know, how his body would feel now, he would have trained in a different way. He wouldn't have been so stressful with the heavy weights and train. You know what I'm saying? Like, as you get older,
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get wiser and you learn from your mistakes. And, you know, I think that a lot of these guys, I think a lot of these guys who are on the steroids now, probably when they get to be 50 years old, will probably be changing their tune, especially if you know, you start having liver problems and you
sure.
know, and you know, any sorts of. There's so many problems that have been associated with it, and you know, and a lot of wrestlers have had the problems. I mean, we've had the wrestlers with heart attacks and strokes. It's not well known because it hasn't happened to Hulk Hogan. You know, it's funny how Hulk Hogan's so much bigger than the wrestling business.
Yes, he is. But I'm sure the wrestlers that the young guys pretty much, and Billy Graham when he was young, he pretty much felt invincible. Well, that at that time when Billy was taking him, the dangers weren't known. But even today, the dangers are known. But a lot of these guys are young; they're in their 20s, and when you're in your 20s, and especially your early 20s, you feel invincible, like nothing could hurt you.
Well, it's more than that. You know, wrestlers are they're insecure because they're so easily replaced.
Yep.
I mean, and we both know this, that you could be the most talented wrestler in the world, and if for whatever reason a promoter doesn't like you, I mean, you could go nowhere in the professional wrestling business. And because of that, and because that, you know, so many people are now on steroids, and also because the public buys the physique, and let's look at it. I mean, Sid Justice is going to be, we all know he's going to be the biggest thing in the WWF with the exception of Hulk Hogan, and he's never developed any wrestling skill. The Ultimate Warrior, you know, Luger, who's a good wrestler, but Lex Luger is not a big star in wrestling because of his wrestling skill. I mean, you know, and we can go on and on down the line, one guy after another, and what does it tell the next rung of guys? There's a lot of guys in wrestling who were brought in. I mean, Lex Luger looked like that, you know, basically before he got into wrestling. Ultimate Warrior actually looked better before he was a wrestler. Those guys, you know, I mean, those guys were like that before wrestling. However, there's a lot of guys who were in wrestling who in 83, 84, 85, when this stuff just exploded, who just said, boy, to keep my job in wrestling. And that's what I think is sad. And if promoters were to educate people away from the bodies, and I know that it's easier to sell the bodies, and the promoters are looking for the quick buck, okay? Yep. And that's why it's happened. It's, you know, but, you know, I look at other countries, and wrestling's more popular in Japan than it is in this country. Wrestling's more popular right now in Mexico than in this country, and while there are guys that use steroids in those countries, the main thrust of their push is on their ability in the ring or charisma or things that aren't just the physique. And those, you know, it flourishes there. And if it was the case there, yeah, we'll still have wrestlers on steroids. And if we have steroid tests, we'll still have wrestlers on steroids, you know, with doctors trying to beat the test. But I think that the goal for wrestling right now should be for the guys who don't want to take steroids, who have the ability to be good wrestlers or in great wrestlers, and they just don't want to because they don't feel like risking their health, that there should be a place in wrestling for them to be able to at least survive in the business and make money if they're good enough, and not basically be forced to take steroids. Those are the guys who I feel sorry for.
Explosive stuff, a long segment, long piece of audio, but I think, as you did, Bob, it was very relevant to what we were trying to do here with the coverage of this era in pro wrestling.
Yes, it was very long, but I just felt this one had to be included. In fact,
Yeah.
all the clips I think on this show were, you know, really part and parcel with the coverage of this story nationally. And I'm not blowing smoke at you, John. Your show was kind of the diamond in the ring. It's the thing everybody went to find out what was happening. And I think you got more coverage, and you weren't even trying for anything like this. I don't want to make this sound like anything other than what I'm stating, but people were looking to you to find out what was going on.
Yeah, that's very true. I'd be, and a matter of fact, even the trial coverage, as we'll get into in our next clip here, I was kind of the go-to guy. I was getting calls from everybody, including major news organizations and radio stations to help cover it for stations, because once people knew I was going to Harrisburg to cover this trial, 10-10 wins, for example. A friend of mine named Fred Hornby, who was a big wrestling fan, a historian, and he worked for 10-10 Wins, WINS, the biggest radio news station in the country. And he got their editors to bring me on as a stringer, and I covered the trial every day for them, as I did for several other Long Island radio stations.
Mm-hmm. So it was big news. And people, I think this is one of those stories where the more people heard, the more information they wanted. And